You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Denver Broncos open up the preseason with a 33-6 victory over the Minnesota Vikings on the road in an impressive showing from the offense, the defense, and the special teams. This is your Locked On Broncos post-game report. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos analyst for the Locked On Network and 9 News, joined alongside our co-host, Sayre Bedinger, Broncos analyst for the Locked On Network and 9 News, also site expert, predominantly orange, of the fan-sided network. And look, I think we talked about it going into the preseason game that can't really invest too much on the wins or losses, right? We just want to see the players come out, execute, and see guys grow along the way. But look, I don't think that anybody's going to complain about a Broncos victory. I mean, there's some people out there that'll find their narratives, but the reality is, Sayre, it was just so great to have Broncos football back on TV, watching guys fly around, all the accumulation of practices, to see it in game format, live action. Man, tell you what, I miss that.
I missed it too, Cody. I really did, and the Vikings broadcast was killing me a little bit with their interviews with these offensive and defensive linemen taking the plays off the screen. I want to see Lorenzo Neal Jr. in scrub time there at the end of the game, but man, it is so good to have Broncos football back on TV, and it was a lot of fun. Like you said, the wins and losses don't really matter. But we're not talking about like a 16-9 win with Brett Rippon scoring 2 touchdowns late in the game. We're talking about a dominating win, the most points the Broncos have scored in a preseason game in over 30 years, I believe I read on Twitter. Yeah. So, and you can believe everything you read on Twitter these days. So I'm taking that for what it's worth there. So, but it was a lot of fun.
No, absolutely. I mean, it was fun to watch because I think from the very beginning, the players are flying around. The Broncos defense first on the field. There's a couple of starters, right? Not your main key guys. No Von Miller, no Bradley Chubb. We expected that. And same thing for Minnesota. For their defense, no Harrison Smith, no Danielle Hunter, no Kendricks. A lot of their starters are out. Maybe outside of maybe a cornerback or two, Cam Dantzler. But I think for the Broncos defense, they came out right away, forced a punt on the first possession, and then the Broncos offense really gets things going a little bit. We got to see a little bit of Pookie. Javonte Williams, his first carry, 11 yards. The second carry, 13 yards. Kind of scared me a moment because he kind of front flipped and kind of hit his head on the turf. You always worry about that. But then Drew Lock off the play action, finding KJ Hamler for 25. The Broncos get it down to the 2-yard line. They said, hey, we're going to go for it on 4th and 2, a slant route to Jerry Jeudy. You could argue maybe a little bit of contact by the cornerback for the Vikings, but the ball goes down there. But then all of a sudden the defense, still stifling. Drew would get the ball back and look, finding KJ Hamler for an 80-yard touchdown play. What we saw in joint training camp practices, KJ Hamler's speed getting behind that Vikings secondary.
Yeah, and it was a great sight to see. I'll touch on what you kind of opened up with was Javonte Williams. They gave him the ball right out of the gates. Melvin Gordon didn't play in this game. And to see Javonte doing exactly what we loved from him on the North Carolina tape, really showing great tackle breaking ability, contact balance, vision, really just getting through to the second level of defense in a hurry. And he had a touchdown that was called back, on the holding from Jerry Jeudy. And I think that more often than not, that kind of stuff's not really going to happen out there on the perimeter. So I think really good overall execution from the offense on those drives besides that penalty. And then, like you said, man, KJ Hamler blowing the top off the defense. You love to see it. Cam Dantzler, where's that guy at? He's like 10 yards behind him on that play.
Did you see Zimmer's halftime interview? He says, I told everybody it was a poor performance. I mean, he just blasted everybody. He said, our punting, we couldn't punt. And look, Minnesota struggled too. We didn't really get to see much of the punt return game because a lot of their punts were high and short. I was really surprised about that. But to touch on it, Trinity Benson to start the game was back returning punts. Hey, and he also had a big day too. We'll talk about his performance a little bit later, but really liked what we saw from the Broncos. The pressure was on. And then guess what, Sayre? Everybody before the game, they were talking about Justin Fields and his performance with the Bears. Here, that's the thing. We wish him the best. That's awesome that he had a great debut. But you know what excited me the most? Seeing Patrick Surtain. First time they tried him on a slant route, he broke it, almost intercepted it. But his reaction time, he read it from the moment that the play started. I went back and I watched the rep. Just from the first move of that wide receiver, he already knew it was coming, and he almost jumped that, almost took it for 6. But then they throw an out route, and he jumps it once again. Pick 6, house call, touchdown, Patrick Surtain and the Broncos. I mean, it was just a dominant performance. But, hey, man, watching him, I know it's the preseason. I don't want to overreact too much, but just watching what he's able to do, it's hard not to be excited about a guy like Surtain.
Impossible not to be excited by it. You know, exactly what the Broncos drafted him for, 9th overall, is what we saw in this game. You know, in that first play that you mentioned, kind of in the Vikings' first red zone appearance, that ball that he tipped in the air should have been picked off by the linebacker. It went through and hit him down in his groin area. That's how far down it got on him. He should have caught it. Oh, well, Patrick Peterson, 2 turnover-worthy plays in his first NFL action. That's exactly what you're hoping for from a game-changing cornerback. You know, even George Payton went so far as to call him a franchise cornerback, and he didn't specifically say Pat Surtain is a franchise corner, but he said, you know, that it's rare to find those types of guys. He was clearly alluding to Surtain, and you love to see him come out and play well. We know what he's capable of doing in one-on-one situations, but to see him out there with all 10 other guys and to be one of the 11 and to just be doing what he does best, it was really special, really special. So I'm excited about him for sure.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to go back and watch it. And obviously, Monday's episode, Lockdown Broncos, we're going to go back on our initial rewatch. This is the immediate post-game reaction from Sayre and myself immediately following the game. But outside of that, too, Teddy Bridgewater got his opportunity to go in on offense. The standing ovation by the Minnesota crowd, you have to love and respect that. And then he also came out and he played really well, too. I mean, I think for the Broncos, some of the situations they got put into, I think that they responded in some good ways. We saw Pat Shurmur open up with play action, and I like that quick hitting play action. And, you know, we saw Teddy go to Eric Saubert a few times. We'll talk about him a little bit later on the show, but I think by the standard for both quarterbacks, look, the Broncos have 2 starting caliber guys on the roster, and I think that that's okay. And I think everyone's looking so far into who's ahead, who's not. Look, I think Drew won the day, obviously, because he had the big plays downfield, but Teddy played pretty good as well and had a touchdown run himself that was called back due to illegal hands to the face by Cam Fleming. So, you know, your quick thoughts really on Teddy's day and Drew in comparison. They both had a pretty good day, in my opinion.
Yeah, they were both good. Teddy was very solid, and I can't be the only one that still holds my breath every time Teddy takes off to run, man. I mean, that injury that he suffered, it kind of freaks me out every time he takes off, but he obviously can still do it. He did it well last year for Carolina. I think he had maybe 5 or 6 rushing TDs last year, maybe even more. So, but really, really good to see him out there healthy, playing some ball. Both of those quarterbacks that you mentioned, Cody, they both gave the Broncos a number of opportunities to score the ball. They drove the ball right down the field. They did exactly what they're supposed to do. And yeah, we can sit here and say all day, well, they're going up against second string, third string guys. But you know what? You've got to go out there and execute and do what you're supposed to do. You and I kind of preemptively called that out on the show earlier in the week. And just knowing that fans are going to gripe about, well, it wasn't against the first string defense, or well, it was against these guys who won't be on NFL rosters. That's not exactly what matters at this point. Of course, you take it into account, but you want to see these guys executing. You want to see them doing their job. You want to see them doing what they're supposed to do. And you and I said it. What we want to see is we want to see the quarterback that gives the Broncos the best opportunity to score points. It's that bare bones with this team. And so we got to see both of the quarterbacks doing that in this game against the Vikings, and it was good.
It's important that they do that too. It doesn't matter who you go out there against. You have to execute. Both Teddy and Drew did it. The offense moved the ball well. The rushing attack looked pretty decent to start off. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Sayre and I, we're going to get into the discussion as to which players stood out to us. There was quite a few. I mean, there wasn't as much that went wrong as anticipated normally in a preseason game. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a second, but I got to tell you about the sponsor of today's episode of the show. That's our good friends over there, betonline.ag, and betonline.ag is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. The Broncos and the Vikings, they had a fun game to watch. If you're a Broncos fan, if you had money maybe on a Patrick Surtain pick 6, then you cashed out a little bit. BetOnline gives you all the coverage you need for all your sporting news, odds, and info for the NFL, MLB, NHL, and all of your UFC and MMA action. You get it all in one place. So I want you to go to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today, and you can get 50% off your first deposit bonus day when you use promo code LOCKEDON. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Sayre, let's get into our players that stood out to us. This was something coming into each game. I think for me, I want to go back and watch the game film, and I want to say, okay, this guy, you know, he was just hard to ignore when you go back and you watch the game tape. But even on the game broadcast as it was happening live, there were several players that really stood out to me. So first off, I'm going to throw it to you. Who is your first player that stood out to you on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that we talked about this guy earlier in the week as well. We actually almost dedicated an entire episode to talking about his great training camp. But Caden Stearns, really, really great to see him out there. Vic Fangio talked about the fact that, okay, this guy's done everything we've asked him to, from picking up the defense, from playing well when his number is called in practice, doing X, Y, and Z. He's doing it all right. What we need to see from him now, Vic Fangio called it the final test, is to see whether or not he can tackle in game situations, because you don't really to see that during practices. So Caden Stearns, man, he was out there coming from that deep free safety spot and really knifing up and getting involved in the running game, making some nice plays, doing some great work in coverage. Really excited to go back and kind of dissect every snap that he played. But, man, when you're talking about guys that just flashed consistently throughout the game, it was Caden Stearns, one of them at least. So really excited about the 5th-round rookie out of Texas for sure.
Hey, I don't disagree with you there. I'm going to stick with the safety as well. Another Texas player, and that's P.J. Locke. I mean, he was flying around. Both guys, look, that duo right there of P.J. Locke and Caden Stearns, it was kind of fun to watch. Now, we're not going to get that in the NFL regular season because you have Justin Simmons and you have Kareem Jackson. But, Sayre, both of those guys flew around. They were hard-hitting. P.J. Locke reminded me a little bit of Kareem Jackson. I got the same exact vibe from Caden Stearns. I mean, both of those guys played like heat-seeking missiles. And look, a couple pass breakups for P.J. Locke, great effort. Same thing for Caden Stearns. There was one play in the back of the goal line where the wide receiver caught it. P.J. Locke had draped coverage over the guy, and he went to go get established. And then all of a sudden, here comes Caden Stearns, pops him, ball comes out, incomplete. I mean, that just fits the mold, I think, for what Vic Fangio's defense wants. I think that when you combine the pressure, collapse in the pocket, and having tough coverage look like the Broncos did all night, that's something I think that you have to account for with these two guys.
100%. And the play that you just described in the back of the end zone, it can't be overstated. P.J. Locke had excellent coverage on the receiver. It was just a really, really good throw that somehow got through. And then Caden Stearns, the rookie, to be able to come in and jar that ball loose without an illegal hit, I mean, it's just brilliant all around. It speaks to the coaching of Vic Fangio and, like you mentioned on your Twitter account, Ed Donatel. Ed Donatel's value to the Denver Broncos can't be overstated either. He's a really good coach, and he has been for a really long time. And there's something in the water with those two guys being able to develop unheralded safety prospects, and even the guys that they've developed that have been higher draft picks. You could go all the way back to San Francisco and the work that they did with guys like Eric Reed, Dante Whitner, Jimmy Ward, players like that. But then you go into the Chicago days, obviously, Eddie Goldman being a day 3 draft selection. So there's a lot of players over the course of their history that they've been able to develop. And I hope that Caden Stearns and P.J. Locke are next in line.
Absolutely. We'll switch to the offensive side of the ball. Who is one player? I mean, we could talk about a variety of players, but who's one player that, is not getting talked about enough that stood out to you?
I don't know if he's not getting talked about enough, but Drew Lock, you've got to give kudos to where they're due. And Drew Lock, the expectations were so high on him coming into this game, even with the fact that we all knew, okay, he's going to be playing against a lot of the non-starters for the Vikings. So what does that mean that you've got to go out there and do? You've got to go out there and get the ball in position to score. And he did it on all 3 drives that he orchestrated. And I'm really impressed by it. I'm really impressed by the things that he did, not just the deep ball to KJ Hamler, which we know based on last season, Drew Lock's deep accuracy was spotty at best, and that really contributed to his overall completion percentage being low, because we know that the Denver Broncos were among the league leaders, if not top of the league, in air yards per attempt last season. So seeing him hit that deep ball was huge, but also seeing him scan the field and find Jerry Jeudy over the middle, and Jerry Jeudy doing the work that he did after the catch, which, by the way, super underrated trait of Jerry Jeudy's, running after the catch. We all know about his route running ability, but man, that guy is a beast in the open field at finding just any crease in the defense and using his speed and quickness to get upfield. So Drew Lock, man, I have to say it was an impressive start from him, not only in terms of just, okay, you made the plays necessary, but man, we saw improved footwork from him. I thought we saw improved decision-making. I think that we saw him do some good thing, mobility. Obviously excellent on play action, where that's his bread and butter. Yeah. And we talked about that on the show earlier in the week of saying we want to see the run game established, and then we want to see the play action come off of it. That's exactly what Pat Shurmur did. So you and I are on the same page with Pat Shurmur the offense and what we want to see from those guys. I'm interested to know who you thought really stood out on offense, Cody.
Yeah, real quick, I'll touch on this too. His mechanics also look good in the pocket, also out on the run too. And there were a couple of those plays. Going back to that Jerry Jeudy catch, great block, by the way. Kendall Hinton coming back underneath. And on a couple of Drew Lock scramble plays, Javonte Williams turned into a blocker. Just love to see that extra effort by some of these young guys there. But the guy that I'm going to mention, he benefited off of Drew Lock's good day as well, and that's Trinity Benson. And look, I think he benefited from everybody, not just Drew Lock, but also Teddy Bridgewater, and he had 2 touchdown catches on the day. This has been a guy that we've talked about. He's been making plays in training camp, downfield. What does he do in this game? He's making plays downfield. He's also catching touchdown passes from multiple quarterbacks. And look, I couldn't even be happier for a guy. And Sayre, I don't want to make this sound like a hot take because this isn't a hot take. In my opinion, I know it's preseason game 1, but with what we saw from Trinity Benson and what we've seen leading up to the preseason, I think that Trinity Benson has secured his roster spot here this upcoming fall with the team because not only is he contributing as a wide receiver, he's also helping out in the return game as kick return, punt returner. And look, Tyree Cleveland didn't do enough today. We didn't see much from Seth Williams and no Deontay Spencer due to his knee injury. I think the writing's on the wall. Trinity Benson is making a big-time claim for his spot on the 53.
And I think that's great news for the Denver Broncos. We've talked about the wide receiver position being such a position of strength for them all offseason. And the reason why it's such a position of strength is because of their depth. And it's crazy. I mean, we've even had some talks on Twitter this offseason, you, me, a number of others about whether or not you keep 8 guys, because who the heck are you going to cut from this unit? And so they probably won't go that far in keeping 8 guys, but you get the idea. Trinity Benson, TB12, man, coming out and having a big day after a big training camp. I love seeing that kind of stuff. I love seeing, we talked about him before, a guy who's been on the roster now for 3 straight off seasons. And for him to just be consistently putting in that work, consistently listening in the film room, consistently waiting for his opportunities, consistently doing whatever's asked of him, whether it's punt return, whether it's kick return, whether it's being a gunner on special teams, playing some, role of some other player during practice, whatever they're asking him to do, to see it all come to a head and get a couple of touchdowns. And by the way, the second one was not an easy touchdown. So It was a really good throw from Teddy Bridgewater and a really nice catch, a contested catch from Trinity Benson. So we're seeing the full gambit of what this guy's capable of doing. And he looks like a regular season ready NFL wide receiver. Yeah,
and he's a weapon too. And I think that the more he can offer to the offense and also on special teams, look, it makes it very, very easy for this coaching staff to say, hey, because look, you have cuts coming up this week. We'll talk about that on Monday's episode of the show. We'll take a look at guys that maybe didn't stand out big enough in week 1 that could be on the line. But, outside of that, really quick, honorable mention player. I know there was a lot of players that had a really good day. Who is your honorable mention player for today in rapid fire?
Absolutely. Honorable mention to KJ Hamler, doing what he does best out there, utilizing his speed to absolutely just tick off the defense, for lack of a better phrase at this point. KJ Hamler's speed is such a problem, and especially going against bigger, longer corners who are kind of more reliant on their physicality, like Cam Dantzler. I think to see KJ Hamler go out there and completely exploit that, guy gets such a good release off the line of scrimmage. And we've mentioned it before. Hamler is so much tougher than he's given credit for because of his size and the way that his game is kind of portrayed. But he's really physical, man. He's a physical player. He's tough. And he did a great job out there today, whether it was the 2 receptions that he had. He caught the first pass from Drew Lock off play action, and then he caught the huge bomb downfield. And then he also did some nice work getting involved out of the backfield as a runner. So, and it was notable as well, Cody, in my opinion, the Broncos didn't even attempt him as a return specialist. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I didn't see him out there as a returner. So I think that speaks volumes to what they believe his role in the offense could be, and the fact that they're trying to get other guys involved behind him.
Good. No, I absolutely agree with you there. My honorable mention player is going to be Jonathan Cooper. And look, even Andre Mintz, undrafted rookie free agent out of Vanderbilt. Cooper stood off, just like from what we've heard at camp. High motor guy, squeezing down the edge of the line of scrimmage. Same thing with Andre Mintz, who came up with several tackles for a loss. I mean, both guys stood out as outside backers. Now, it's even interesting. Cooper even started the game at inside backer, too. So he's playing both of those positions here in the preseason. got to get some recognition for that, so he's going to be my honorable mention guy. But Sayre, coming up here in just a moment, Broncos country, we're going to talk about our final takeaways, a couple of the storylines that we really need to hit on in the Broncos' 33-6 victory over the Minnesota Vikings in Week 1 of preseason action. But before we do that, let me tell you about the two other sponsors of today's episode of the show. That's our good friends over there at Built Bar and Rock Auto. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar that is out there on the market today. The bars are covered in 100% chocolate, and they're amazing. They're soft, and they're easy to chew. They have 9 amazing, delicious flavors, including the occasional limited time flavor, my personal go-to, peanut butter brownie. I put it in the fridge or the freezer. I take it out about after an hour, take a bite into it, and I enjoy it. It gives me a little bit of a boost before a workout, or if I'm just having a slowish day, bam, I have a little bit of a combination of something that's healthy for you and a little bit of dessert. Yes, Built Bars are healthy. They contain 17 grams of protein, only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar. And I want you to try a box of Built Bar today. If you haven't done so already, by going to Built.com, and when you go to checkout, use promo code LOCKEDON. That's going to get you 15% off your next order. Once again, promo code LOCK15 is going to get you 15% off your next order at Built.com. And our good friends over there, rockauto.com. If you need anything for your vehicle, rockauto.com has everything. They've been serving auto parts customers online for over 20 years. Their prices are always reliably low, whether you're a professional or a do-it-yourselfer. Their catalog online at rockauto.com is easy to navigate. You can quickly see all the parts available for your car or truck based on year, make, model. You can choose the brand, specifications, and even the prices that you prefer. All in one place, rockauto.com. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Lockdown Broncos in there. How did you hear about us box, so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts that your car will ever need. rockauto.com. With that said, Sayre, let's get into our final takeaways here in the 2-minute warning here, Locked On Broncos post-game report. Just a reminder, this podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or the Odyssey app, not to mention video format on YouTube every single day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't have to miss out on Sayre or myself. If you have friends or family who are Broncos fans, make sure that they are locked in to what we have going on here. You can even watch the show on YouTube on your TV if you have a smart TV. But with that said, final takeaways. Let's talk about the quarterback competition. I think there's a lot of discussion right now. I've seen it on Twitter, Sayre. I've seen a lot of Broncos fans come out and they said, hey, Drew Lock needs to be named the starter for the Broncos. Now, is it too premature to get into these thoughts? I feel like it might be, just because of the fact this is preseason game number 1. Drew is good, right? And I think it's easy to say that his highs are higher than anything else, and he's got the ability downfield. We didn't necessarily see that with Teddy, but we saw Teddy take care of the ball and make several improvised plays, and he looked well doing it. What are your thoughts here on maybe how the Broncos should approach the quarterback competition with 2 preseason games remaining?
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with going and approaching this as a game week, against Seattle, and give Teddy Bridgewater the start and approaching it as though he's going to be the starter this week. I don't think they're running out of time. I think they've got plenty of time to get Drew as many reps as he needs if he ends up being the starter, which I do think he will be. And I think today showed us why. I think, when you come into this argument about who's going to be the winner of the quarterback battle, you and I have talked about this. Drew Lock simply has higher long-term upside for the Broncos, and there's nothing against Teddy Bridgewater in that. I think what we saw in the game against the Minnesota Vikings was absolutely huge. We saw the best of Drew Lock, and I think we saw some of the best of Teddy Bridgewater. And what that indicates to me is that you can go into the regular season believing that, okay, if we can get the best out of Drew Lock and the best out of Teddy Bridgewater, which we've seen in a limited sample here, if that can happen, we ride to open the season with the higher upside play. And at any point, we can come back and say, all right, we need Teddy. We need Teddy to come in. If Drew's not working out, if he hits a cold streak, you can take him out and put Teddy Bridgewater into the action. I think today was a perfect example of both guys being their best, and that really protecting the Broncos over the course of a long 17-game season if need be.
Well, I was impressed by the Broncos special teams unit. I was also impressed with the defense. And look, it's not that hard to make the argument. The Broncos can have some big plays on special teams like what Levante Bellamy did to open up the second half. His speed is unreal. And obviously he ended up getting carted off the field with a lower leg injury in that late third quarter there. So not sure what the prognosis is yet. Once we know, we'll break it down here, Locked On Broncos. We're going to talk about that coming up here in just a moment, actually. But let's talk about Patrick Surtain. And look, Sayre, you know me, I'm a DB guy through and through. Watching him play, it is, and seeing what he's done this week, especially in one-on-ones, it's hard not to say that he's the real deal. I mean, he looks every bit the part. His reaction time, his ability to come up in the run, his ability to break on the ball. I mean, he truly is a weapon. I think he's the real deal.
I do too. I mean, we've talked about this before as well. I keep bringing it about before, but I mean, when he got to Alabama, he looked like a pro, and it's not necessarily because, man, he's so big or man, he's so fast. The fact that, he looked like a pro from such a young age is a testament to his work off the field, film study, technique, preparation, all the things that he has to do in order to prepare to be excellent on the field. You see that come across in the way that he plays. He's picture perfect. If you want to draw up, the new age Tommy Mansky football version, we want somebody to give tutorials to young players around the country. You want to show them how Pat Surtain II plays defensive back, how he plays the cornerback position. George Paton made a reference to the fact that, man, it's rare you get rookies that can play 3 different positions. All we've heard this offseason is really about the fact that, man, the Broncos DBs are so talented, they're going to have to use 6 of them at a time a lot of the time. Well, Pat Surtain, we haven't heard a ton about him playing outside corner. We've heard a lot about him being included in the dime package with the rest of the starting offense. So for him to just come out here and do, obviously, it's not any sort of surprise. But the fact that he just went out there in a game and just dominated from the outside cornerback position, I don't care who he's going up against, it was impressive.
It really was, to say the least, and I can't wait to see more. But I'm also at the point now, we've seen a lot from Patrick Surtain. We've seen a lot from Javonte Williams. We don't need to see them rest of the preseason, in my opinion, Sayre. We really don't. We can't risk that. And really at running back now, it kind of changed things because there's a little bit of concern. Mike Boone went down. Obviously, we know 4 to 6 weeks he's out. Levante Bellamy went down. Not sure the prognosis there in terms of what the injury truly was. We know his lower leg, ankle area. Is there a sign for concern right now? Because really, it all boils down to Royce Freeman, Demaria Crockett. Look, I liked what Crockett brought to the table as well. A couple of hard runs there, and Adam Prentice as the fullback kicking guys out. Is there a concern right now about the Broncos' depth at running back with some of these injuries?
I think it's definitely something to think about. I think you really bring, maybe these next couple of weeks, you bring in another body just to get them familiar with the offense, just to get them up to speed. Because I think you still protect yourself. If you're George Paton, you can't necessarily just miss the opportunity to potentially trade Royce Freeman when you've still got Melvin Gordon, you've still got Javonte Williams, and you can't miss the opportunity to potentially trade Royce Freeman for something valuable if you get the opportunity, because Boone's going to hopefully be back either by the regular season opener or at some point a couple weeks thereafter. And then Crockett hopefully playing well. So I think you bring in a body, get this next person, if they do bring in somebody in familiar with the offense, and just add a little bit of depth. There's probably some really good running backs that are still available out there. And we know it's unfortunate. Running backs are kind of a dime a dozen at these points. So hopefully we do see them bring in another body. But I think for now, it's still okay.
Absolutely. Well, Broncos country, we are eager for your thoughts here. Let us know in the comment section on YouTube what you thought of the Broncos' first preseason game, a 33-6 victory on the road against the Minnesota Vikings next Saturday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. That's a late one. They play the Seattle Seahawks on the Pacific Coast. So we're going to have a complete recap all week long. What's going on with the Denver Broncos as they return back to home this week for a practice. It'll be nice for players to get back in their own beds, but mostly coming away healthy outside of a couple of injuries that we will monitor here on Lockdown Broncos. But that'll do it for today's post-game report. Broncos start off 1-0 in the preseason. A lot of fun things to watch, a lot of things for the team to continuously improve on. That's what the coaches are going to go back, watch the film on. Players are going to make those adjustments going into next week. And we'll have it covered here every single day on the Locked On Broncos podcast.